Welcome to the Young Turks. I'm Kasparian. John Iadarola joins us for another awesome episode of the show.
That's speculation. We don't know yet.
It is. I should wait for a very comprehensive report to come out.
It will be submitted in a few years.
Anyway, it's been a really slow news day. I don't really know what to talk about today. Do you have any stories?
I talked with the head of the national nurses on the damage report today, so we can talk about Bernie Sanders and Medicare for all.
I would actually love to do that. But of course, I'm joking. It's been a pretty big news day, and we have a ton to report in regard to Mueller's investigation and what his actual report says. Now, of course, it's heavily redacted, but we are going to give you specific excerpts from the report that we feel is relevant and important for you to know. Later, we will go to William Barr's press conference, not only because I'm interested to see your reaction and see what you guys have to say about it, but more importantly, the reaction from congressional Democrats following his press conference. And later in the show, we have a bunch of other really great stories that I really do hope we get to. So why don't we get started?
I was just laughing at the lower third. They have so much fun with that thing.
I know, they do. Sometimes I don't get an opportunity to read them because I'm focused, but
oh, and one other tease. Yeah. So if we get to it, the one story that I might present is on Facebook teaming up with a right-wing news site to do fact checking, and I'm not sure how I feel about it.
What?
We'll talk about it.
John.
We'll talk about it.
All right, I'm gonna quit my job.
We'll talk about it.
Like if I lose you, then there's no point in what I'm doing right now.
There just seems to be a lot more money on the other side. Can we agree on that?
I think we all know,
I think I'm gonna turn right-wing.
Okay. All right.
Oh, fracking, it's so efficient. Oh.
Please, let's get started.
Okay.
Before I become very depressed. All right. Robert Mueller's report, the heavily redacted version, has been released to the public, and journalists, of course, are poring over it, sharing excerpts and analysis, and we will do the same today. Now, there are various categories where we're gonna break this down, but I wanna start off with what I personally feel is an important part of Mueller's report. Again, this is not interpretation, this is literally an excerpt from Mueller's report. It says, quote, "We concluded that Congress has the authority to prohibit a president's corrupt use of his authority in order to protect the integrity of the administration of justice." Now, there is some debate. Of course, this is a very politically driven debate as to whether or not Mueller wanted Congress to investigate the obstruction of justice charges against the president. Now, the report specifically hones in on the issue of collusion and obstruction of justice, something that most people already know. And this report, I have to be honest, did not provide much clarity when it comes to those two issues. Now, let me give you the relevant portions of this report. I want to begin with the beginning. What was Donald Trump's reaction to the investigation? What was his reaction to the special counsel's involvement in the investigation? And here's what the report indicates. On May 17th, 2017, the acting attorney general for the Russia investigation appointed a special counsel to conduct the investigation and related matters. The president reacted to news that a special counsel had been appointed by telling advisors that it was, quote, "the end of his presidency," and demanding that Sessions, meaning Jeff Sessions, of course, resign. Now, he specifically said the following, and of course I have to censor it. "Oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm effed." Okay, so.
Flatulent, I think is I think that's what he said. But it's good of you to blank it out though.
If you have done nothing wrong, why the panic?
Maybe this is the episode where I disagree with you a lot. I don't actually interpret that section the same as everyone else. And I've seen that particular section spread around a lot. No, I think he very enthusiastically, he wanted the Russians to help him. I think he was following along as all the different stuff came out and everything, all that stuff. You could say whether you think that rises to the level of collusion or whatever, which is of course not a legal term, that's fine. But that section is also consistent with him just thinking that it would derail his presidency even if there wasn't a crime. Or alternatively, that there's a crime but it's not related to anything having to do with the election. Like if he is actually worried that the investigation could spin out to other things, which they did not look into in the Mueller report, he could think it's ended for that reason. But I also think if he thinks it would suck up all the oxygen in the room, that could explain what he said there. It doesn't explain all of what he did, but.
Yeah, we actually don't disagree at all.
Okay, well, some people on Twitter are presenting that as proof itself that he was guilty.
So look, and I think that there's a lot of miscommunication about Trump's potential crimes. And so there's the whole issue of collusion, which congressional Democrats have really latched onto. And then there's the issue of potential financial crime, something that we've brought up on the show quite a bit. And so the reason why I bring up that quote and how he panics is because I feel like it appears that he's in some way acknowledging that there's something going on, and maybe it's not collusion. I personally think he was worried that the investigation wouldn't be as limited in scope, and the investigation was limited in scope. Mueller specifically looked at collusion. Did Donald Trump and his campaign willingly cooperate with the Russians or collude with the Russians in order to give him a leg up or an advantage in this election? That is what he focused on. All of the other potential issues, which the report does indicate there were other issues, were outsourced to other investigators. So again, Mueller's investigation was limited in scope.
Yeah, well, or specifically to coordination or conspiracy, not to collusion, which is a term that they only use in the report in quoting other people or explaining why they don't use the term collusion.
Right.
Yeah, and then there's another section of the report that specifically says that obstruction of justice might not have been founded on trying to hide any sort of underlying crime having to do with conspiracy, but could well have been generated by his justifiable fears that it would uncover other crimes that we don't necessarily know about, and that could be personal or financial or whatever. That specifically is talked about in the report. Exactly.
So far we are in agreement. Now, in the very beginning, of course, there was the issue of Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He decided to recuse himself, and Donald Trump was furious about it. And so he wanted Jeff Sessions to resign. And so according to the report, Sessions submitted his resignation, but the president ultimately did not accept it. The president told aides that the special counsel had conflicts of interest and suggested that the special counsel therefore could not serve. The president's advisors told him the asserted conflicts were meritless and had already been considered by the Department of Justice. Now, I bring up this portion of the report because it really does show you that while someone like William Barr, Donald Trump's attorney general, argues that no, I mean, look, Donald Trump has done everything to cooperate. He didn't try to use his executive powers in preventing others from cooperating, or he didn't use his executive privilege in a way that would hinder this investigation. That is, in my opinion, misleading because Trump was surrounded with aides who kept trying to convince him or talk him out of jumping off a cliff.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's an important point in the report for you to know and just go back to for context when we talk about William Barr's press conference today.
Yeah, I mean, when he claimed this morning that there had been full and total cooperation, that was when he jumped the shark. Like nobody actually believes that. They might pretend to if you're Jesse Waters or something, but nobody believes it. I mean, we know that he didn't actually sit down and testify before Mueller. So you're gonna fall far short of total cooperation with that, let alone trying to fire literally everyone involved in the investigation at one point or another.
Exactly. And one final portion of this having to do with Jeff Sessions. In early summer of 2017, the president called Sessions at home and again asked him to reverse his recusal from the Russia investigation.
Oh, and also, I just want to mention this because you had in your last graphic that he was told that the concerns were meritless. Just bear in mind, this is going to be a sort of constant theme throughout all of this, is that he was told that his concerns about Mueller and his partisanship or whatever were meritless. Remember, of course, he's a Republican. And of course, for almost 2 years, he continued to say that it was the case, that these were angry Democrats and all that. So he just lied and lied and lied month after month after month, going far beyond just saying that this guy is a Democrat when he's not, but also saying that he is treasonous. So when you're keeping a scorecard of all of the things that are not obstruction of justice, accusing the person investigating of you committing treason, not obstruction of justice.
Exactly. And so now I want to go to a more in-depth look at what the report says in regard to collusion. So understand that based on Mueller's findings, there was not enough evidence to prove conspiracy, right? There just wasn't enough evidence. But there were certain parts of the campaign that raised questions, and that did come up during this investigation. So according to the Mueller report, Mueller found there was Mueller found there was insufficient evidence to establish that Trump or his associates engaged in a criminal conspiracy with Russia to disrupt the 2016 election. That is the interpretation of the New York Times. Let me give you more from the New York Times. Apparently, Barr repeatedly said that the president's campaign did not collude with Russia. Mueller's report, though, offers a more nuanced definition. This is what I was alluding to. He writes that while there was ample evidence of contacts between the Trump campaign and Russia as it carried out its social media influence and hacking campaigns, the evidence was not strong enough to support bringing criminal charges. So again, there were moments in the campaign where things were happening that were super questionable, but you have a high burden of proof here to prove conspiracy, and Mueller was not able to do that.
Yeah, and specifically they say to prove that you would need to show not only that they were both working towards the sort of shared interests or helping out each other, but that there was a formal agreement between them, which is a bar that I don't think many people ever expected that you would find, like a signed letter with like Trump's like ring seal in wax or something saying, I would like to collude with you. Nobody actually thought we were gonna find that,
right.
But that is similar to the bar that was set for proving a criminal conspiracy. And again, just bear in mind when because throughout this, we're gonna be talking a little bit about what Barr had said a couple of weeks ago and what we ended up getting. Barr keeps using the term collusion. Mueller does not use that term. Barr uses it because Trump uses it, because it's a purposefully vague thing that has little connection to actual law. Conspiracy is a different thing, and you can do all sorts of things that look extremely unethical or arguably criminal that do not rise to the level of a criminal conspiracy.
Exactly, and that's an important distinction to make. Finally, I gave you the New York Times interpretation, and I think it's important to give you what the actual report says. The report says, quote, while the investigation identified numerous links between individuals with ties to the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign, the evidence was not sufficient to support criminal charges. Among other things, the evidence was not sufficient to charge any campaign official as an unregistered agent of the Russian government or other Russian principal. So honestly, for me, the collusion conspiracy question, I just want to put it to rest. Because Mueller says he doesn't have enough evidence to prove that conspiracy occurred, and let's let it go.
Well, again, I don't like collusion and conspiracy being used in the same sentence as if they're the same thing. I mean, there are all sorts of things throughout the report that look extremely unethical, and that indeed Trump and his associates lied about constantly at the time and while the investigation was going on, which is incredibly suspicious. There are also sections, you referenced that the report is heavily redacted, and it is, but it's not redacted consistently throughout. It tends to be certain sections are heavily redacted. In fact, there are a couple of pages where there's nothing but the page number and the header. And those sections tend to be involving the actual hacking that produced the emails and any Trump campaign coordination with WikiLeaks. Those sections are heavily redacted. We don't know much of what's in there, probably because of Roger Stone's ongoing legal troubles.
Yeah, that was cited as the reason for those pages being heavily redacted. So, okay, so that's what we know so far when it comes to this particular issue, the accusations that Trump's campaign had worked with the Russians in order to undermine the election. This is what we know, and you can do with that information what you will. But what I think is much more unclear is whether or not Donald Trump obstructed justice. And there seems to be.
I don't think it's unclear at all.
Well, I'm on your.
But perhaps we'll disagree.
I'm trying to be fair. I'm trying to be fair, but I'm on your camp. I think there are several instances where Trump's behavior appeared to obstruct justice, and Mueller highlights that throughout the report. The important thing that I want you to take away as you watch this is that the narrative that we're getting from the Attorney General, who is not supposed to be Donald Trump's personal lawyer, is very different than the very nuanced report that Mueller put together.
Yeah, and in certain cases they're contradictory.
Yes.
So when it comes to obstruction, for instance, Barr said 2 weeks ago, Mueller left it up to me to decide whether or not there's gonna be a criminal like prosecution or we're gonna go forward that way. That's not in the report. Mueller seems to be pretty clear that he doesn't believe that there could be charges because of that old DOJ memo that I think is extremely questionable, but apparently Mueller was abiding by it, that he would not be able to bring forward charges. That's perhaps why he talks so much about Congress's role potentially in that you started off this segment with. He never said it was up to Barr to determine, but that was exactly what Barr said at the time. So at least in that area, Barr's interpretation or his presentation of what was in the memo was not borne out by the Mueller report itself.
Absolutely. So with that said, let's go to the details of the obstruction part of this investigation. Mueller's report focused on obstruction in addition to collusion, and the obstruction portion of it, I think, brought up a number of issues that the American public should be aware of, and you should especially be aware of as you watch some of the comments coming from Attorney General William Barr. So the report detailed Trump's efforts to thwart the investigation. The report said that by virtue of his position as president, he had the authority to carry out several of the acts in question, including firing James Comey as FBI director. So the report says, look, as president, he can go ahead and fire the FBI director, but it also continues to talk about some of the efforts to harm the investigation. These actions ranged, and this is the report, I'm reading from the report. These actions ranged from efforts to remove the special counsel and to reverse the effect of the Attorney General's recusal, to the attempted use of official power to limit the scope of the investigation, to direct and indirect contacts with witnesses with the potential to influence their testimony.
So
that's huge.
I can't tell if that's a description of what he did or if that's a description of all of the potential ways one could obstruct justice.
No. I mean, if you read the report,
it sounds like that's a bullet point list of how you diagnose obstruction.
That's right, and these are things that Trump's accused of doing.
Exactly.
So this is the reason why it's so important for the public to have access to this report, because if you simply rely on what William Barr says, I mean, it conflicts quite a bit with what the actual report says. Let me give you more. Again, this is from Mueller's report. In early 2018, the press reported that the president had directed McGahn, that was the lawyer McGahn, to have the special counsel removed in June of 2017, and that McGahn had threatened to resign rather than carry out the order. The president reacted to the news stories by directing White House officials to tell McGahn to dispute the story and to create a record stating he had not been ordered to have the special counsel removed.
We should be done with this topic with that.
Okay, so one of the things that's really standing out is the differences in the legal standard, right? And so with someone like William Barr, I've heard legal experts refer to him and his theory, his legal theories, as fringe legal theories, because in his mind, if there was no underlying crime, and in this investigation, the potential underlying crime was conspiracy, if that hasn't been proven, and he's not guilty of conspiracy, well then he can't be guilty of obstructing justice. That is the argument that they keep making.
Yeah, that's BS.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not only BS from my non-legal standpoint, it's another area where, man, the people who got the Barr memo and were like, this confirms everything I've ever said, we win, and we're so excited. And some now still I saw tweeting saying, well, I mean, the Mueller report pretty much confirms everything. Like, what you just said about the no underlying crime means you don't have to worry about obstruction of justice was in the Barr memo. The Mueller report not only doesn't say that, but it specifically lies out why you do not need an underlying crime. There's a gigantic paragraph specifically about that. And then on top of that, also lays out other explanations for potential underlying crimes other than conspiracy or coordination that could justify obstruction of justice charges. It was in the report, a big section. Barr saw it. And he didn't care.
That's right.
Because that's what he got into that position because he doesn't believe that obstruction of justice is a real thing. He is there to protect powerful people from the consequences of their actions. That's what he auditioned for with his 19-page letter to Trump last year, and that's why he has the position today.
He must have been bored in retirement.
I guess.
Devastatingly bored.
I guess, but again, on two of the biggest issues, the Barr memo is directly contradicted by what's in the Mueller report.
Yes, exactly. So let me give you more. And again, this is going back to what happened or what transpired between Donald Trump and McGahn. McGahn told those officials that the media reports were accurate in stating that the president had directed McGahn to have the special counsel removed. The president then met with McGahn in the Oval Office and again pressured him to deny the reports. In the same meeting, the president also asked McGahn why he had told the special counsel about the president's effort to remove the special counsel and why McGahn took notes of his conversation with the president. Allegedly, McGahn had responded to Trump by saying, I'm paraphrasing, I'm a lawyer, I'm supposed to take notes, I take notes. Trump thought it was strange.
I think he said, I'm a real lawyer. And Trump was like, I've had lots of lawyers, they never take any notes. Yeah, you don't like a paper trail, that's suspicious is what that is. Yeah.
Let me give you more. We were not, and again, this is Mueller's report, we were not persuaded by the argument that the president has blanket constitutional immunity to engage in acts that would corruptly obstruct justice through the exercise of otherwise valid Article 2 powers protecting the integrity of its own proceedings and the proceedings of Article 3 courts and grand juries. So that is what you were alluding to earlier, John. It shows that there is a difference in legal interpretation between Robert Mueller and William Barr. So let me give you, so that is what stood out to me personally when it came to the obstruction portion of the report. Of course, the report came out this morning. It was hundreds of pages, over 400 pages, and more information is gonna come in as we pour over it, as other journalists pour over it. But I do think that it's interesting to juxtapose William Barr's interpretation and what the report really says.
Yeah, and look, we can go to their conclusion. I also have my conclusion. I think that what was revealed on obstruction of justice and the reaction to it thus far should horrify us, I think. I think that it is the best example yet of how much has been normalized over the past couple of years of Trump's presidency that we now think that this is acceptable. He did way worse stuff than Nixon did, which took down Nixon. But for Trump, it's like maybe he'll get a bad news cycle out of it. He obstructed justice under one condition, that obstruction of justice has any meaning whatsoever. Either it does or it doesn't. If you can fire the head of the FBI and then try to push out your AG and then try to remove the special counsel himself and then bring in an AG whose only qualification is a sense of profound loyalty to you as an individual, if you can do all of that while also tampering with witnesses, dangling pardons and attacking them in social media, lying about virtually every aspect of the investigation, trying to get others to lie about the investigation, not actually cooperating in terms of sitting down with the investigator and testifying, if you can do all of that, then I am asking you a 100% serious, honest question. What could a future president possibly do that would count as obstruction of justice if this doesn't? In the future, I've been saying for like 2 years now, even if you don't care about anything to do with Russia, you should be terrified about what he's doing in terms of obstruction of justice. Because this is a precedent now for no accountability for the president ever again on anything. And up until now, we have had a couple of different ways to stop the president from breaking the law, something a president has many opportunities to do. Either he has a personal sense of ethics that stops him from breaking the law, or we have accountability in terms of investigations. Unless Congress does something about this, that one is gone. And so now all we have is the hope that they are a good person and that they personally don't want to break the law. We know that that doesn't stop Donald Trump. Maybe we'll get lucky with future presidents and they will feel like they should not do bad things. But any president could break the law from now on. And why would they ever have to fear an investigation? Let the investigation start. Fire them all. Fire all of them.
Yeah, I think that this does set a dangerous precedent. And I think that Trump has surrounded himself with people, including William Barr, who believe that the executive branch has the most power, does not believe in what our Constitution is supposed to protect, which is checks and balances, 3 branches of government. And I just wanna, in terms of the obstruction allegations, I wanna read you one more portion from the Mueller report that I thought was important. So it writes, if we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would state so.
Yeah.
So that's important to keep in mind. And while Trump has surrounded himself with people who protect him, while the Senate is full of Republicans who are more interested in protecting him rather than doing what's right for the country, I just want you to think about how these very Republicans responded to and handled the investigation into Bill Clinton when he engaged in an affair with an intern. And with that said, let's go to this old video of Senator Lindsey Graham. Again, he's commenting on Bill Clinton.
He doesn't have to say go lie for me to be a crime. You don't have to say let's obstruct justice for it to be a crime. You judge people on their conduct, not magic phrases.
Yeah, there's no way that Trump passes that test, obviously. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the Democrats with what they've said, which I find to be a little bit worrisome. But it is good to know that we do have some strong progressives in office right now. And I saw that Bernie Sanders came out after this, and he was saying that further investigations by Congress are warranted. AOC said that she is, as a result of this report, she's signing on to Rashida Tlaib's impeachment proposal. And so thankfully, we do have strong progressives that are taking these concerns seriously.
When we come back from the break, there are other portions of the report that I want to share with you all, and we will, of course, get to William Barr's press conference today and debunk some of the statements he made.
We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment.
Welcome back to TYT. I have an important announcement to make. I love it when you do that with your shirt instead of the tie.
No,
yeah, it looks
don't
really,
say that.
You look so suave, and like I'm into it.
I don't think anyone agrees with you right now.
Why?
I mean, I like what you're saying, but I don't think anyone else is like, yeah, suave is what I'd say.
Well, we're surrounded by dudes, so.
Can I, look, you just gave me a compliment and I have very low self-esteem, so I have to undercut the compliment. Do you know why I'm not wearing a tie with this? Because this collar won't actually shut around my neck.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my neck is too thick, so I can't wear ties with it. Or I could start, but it's not gonna end well.
Isn't it a good thing to have a thick neck as a
Depends.
guy, or I don't know, whatever.
I don't know. Look at Alex Jones, it's not a good thing in some cases.
Okay, members' comments. I love hearing from you guys. So Gabby Marita writes in and says, let's be honest, if this sort of report came out about Obama, he would have already been impeached and removed from office. No, Gabby, what you don't understand is if this report came out about Obama, he wouldn't even have to wait for someone or for Congress to impeach him. He would just leave himself. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, he was just too willing to concede to the other side. Whereas Trump and the people that he surrounded himself with make me fearful about the precedent it sets moving forward, and also how someone like Trump would react if he were to get impeached, right? Like, he's not the kind of person who's just gonna step down easily.
Well, there's been no consequences for his actions up until now. Why would he start assuming there would be later? And I will just say, one of the things that scares me the most about obstruction, which is the part that I think precedent-wise has always been the most important part of this, because I think that every other politician is looking to this to see what would I do in this circumstance? And someone will eventually end up being the next president and the president after that, is that it's not just that we're having a conversation about whether he obstructed justice or not. What scares me is how obviously so many people don't care. Like I mean, obviously all of Trump's defenders don't care. They think he should do whatever he wants. He should have fired Mueller and all that. But so many people that otherwise brand themselves as caring about transparency and accountability and questioning the government, in this case, hands off, don't care, it's not important, don't talk about it. And that is very scary for the future.
Cloyd writes in, and you'll like this, John, you'd make an awful right winger simply because you're stating way too many facts.
And suave.
And finally, one of 19 writes in and says, so Trump takes no responsibility for initiating this investigation. However, it seems the report includes numerous examples that support the reasons for starting this investigation, and you're absolutely right. That's why it's so important to see the report, so we can see with our eyes what Mueller actually found through his 2-year-long investigation.
And just imagine if he hadn't fired Comey. Like the FBI would have still investigated a little, but it would have been 10% maximum of what he ended up getting. And he only did that because he's got this expectation of 100% loyalty. And he believes that if you will not give that you're disloyal, that you're a traitor. And that put him in this position that has harmed him so much.
Yes. So let's talk about Game of Thrones for a second. Think about things that make us happy before we get back to things that make us unhappy. Game of Thrones has begun. Last week was the season premiere, and it's the last season. And so TYT for years now has been doing post Game of Thrones analysis and reviews. And so if you are interested in that show, if you're a huge fan like most of us are here, you can tune in every Sunday to watch live as the analysis happens. It happens, of course, right after Game of Thrones airs. And you can catch it live if you're not a member. Anyone can watch that by going to tyt.com/live. But if you are a member, you get to watch it whenever you want. It's in our archives, and that's pretty nice, pretty sweet, because you can't really DVR, the online stream, I don't think, can you?
Well, also I believe that part of it is exclusive to members.
Yes.
Like the last half, which is generally we go through the episode and everything, we talk, we have fun. There's a little bit of that in the members exclusive thing, but there's also sort of predictions for the next episode, responding to the episode teaser and all that. And so that's a lot of fun too.
Yes, and if you wanna get access to all of this stuff uninterrupted, you just go to tyt.com/join and please become a member. We wanna make sure we give you guys exclusive content just to thank you for helping us survive and exist in this very tumultuous media landscape.
Yes.
All right. Following the release of the Mueller report, there were a number of things that came up that either confirmed or verified previous news reports or gave us more in-depth information into what was really going on with Donald Trump's campaign and Donald Trump's presidency. So one of the things that of course was reported early on was Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with the Russians in Trump Tower. And so Mueller's report, of course, looked into that. And I wanted to share you portions of the report that I thought were relevant when it came to that situation. So the report says, quote, on several occasions, the president directed aides not to publicly disclose the emails setting up the June 9th, 2016 meeting, suggesting the emails would not leak and that the number of lawyers with access to them should be limited. Now, this is an important thing to bring up because not only does it have to do with the Trump Tower meeting with the Russians, it also has to do with how Trump was, of course, behind the scenes trying to cover things up or trying to manipulate the situation.
Yeah.
And so that is relevant because again, you have his attorney general claiming that there was no obstruction of justice, but the report does not actually indicate that.
And he specifically says that they made every effort to make all documentation available. They're specifically here trying to stop emails from being acquired.
Exactly. The report continues to say, before the emails became public, the president edited a press statement for Trump Jr. by deleting a line that acknowledged that the meeting was with an individual who Trump Jr. was told might have information helpful to the campaign, and instead said only the meeting was about adoptions of Russian children. So we can all recall how that really played out publicly and how it was later discovered that no, they discussed other things. They discussed sanctions. They discussed situations that hurt Russia financially, and of course they wanted some of those issues to be resolved. And so Don Jr. was not forthcoming. The Trump camp was not forthcoming when it came to that meeting. And now we know what was really going on. We know who the puppet master was behind the scenes, and it was Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, I will say he wasn't forthcoming, but I hate Don Jr. as much as anyone. He was going to be more forthcoming than Trump was. Like he was actually going to say that they talked about some of this stuff. Trump ended up deleting it and hiding it a little bit. So, yeah.
When the press asked questions about the president's involvement in Trump Jr.'s statement, the president's personal lawyer repeatedly denied that the president had played any role.
And again, that just every page, it just screams from it. Every opportunity where it made sense for them, they lied. Even in opportunities where it didn't make any sense and where people risked spending years in jail if they lied, they chose to lie. They lied and they lied. And so for people who maybe haven't been following this or wondering why were people following this so much for 2 years, it's because everywhere you turned, they were lying. And generally, when a huge group of people lie constantly about one subject, it leads you to believe that there might be something there.
Right, and so every time you saw analysis or predictions when it came to this investigation, I think you can understand why people, and this includes me, I didn't know in the beginning. I don't know if there's conspiracy. I have no idea if he actually colluded with the Russians. But as this investigation kept going on, the actions of Donald Trump And those who surrounded him started to make me skeptical about these denials because they were not forthcoming. It was proven over and over again that they would make statements, and then later it was discovered that they were lying when they would make those statements. And why would you do that? Just be straightforward and tell the truth about what's going on. Now again, as John and I talked about earlier, I think that Trump was worried that the scope of the investigation wouldn't be as narrow and that Mueller would look into other issues. And the fact of the matter is, Mueller in the report does say that other issues came up. However, those investigations were outsourced to others. So let me give you the details on that. During the course of the investigation, the office periodically identified evidence of potential criminal activity that was outside the scope of the special counsel's jurisdiction established by the acting attorney general. After consultation with the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, the office referred that evidence to appropriate law enforcement authorities, principally other components of the Department of Justice and the FBI. So again, this further confirms and verifies that Mueller's investigation was in fact limited in scope. The question is, did Donald Trump know that? And had he not known that, then I can understand why there would be panic and a number of people refusing to be forthcoming about what was really going on. Now, whether or not those investigations come up with any type of real criminal activity or prove criminal activity, I don't know, but there are other investigations happening.
Yeah, and there were almost more charges in the case that you were just talking about the Trump Tower. I mean, he says in the Mueller report that he considered charging the people there, and the people there were the president's son, the campaign co-chair, Jared Kushner, the highest ranking people in the campaign, almost faced charges because what they were doing with the meeting was attempting to solicit a contribution, something of value from a foreign national, which is a felony. And the only reason, and Mueller lists this, you can read it yourself, the only reason they didn't face charges was because the Mueller team didn't think that they could prove that the people at the meeting were savvy enough to know that they were breaking the law. And in this case, because in the end they didn't end up receiving anything, you would have to show intent to break the law. And they're effectively saying that Don Jr. is such a dope that he probably didn't know it was legal or illegal. And so he's not facing any charges, but what they attempted to do, like we have murder, we have attempted murder. You have attempted versions of crimes, that's attempted coordination. They might not have actually done it, and it might not be enough to land them in jail, but it certainly is, it's bordering on illegal. It was an attempted crime, and it's certainly unethical.
Yes, and one other portion of the report pertaining to the other potential crimes that were outsourced to other investigators. Mueller writes, 12 of those referrals remain secret. I'm sorry, this is not from Mueller's report. This is actually from the New York Times. 12 of the referrals remain secret. 2 others have been made public, including prosecutions involving Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, and Gregory B. Craig, a White House counsel in the Obama administration. So again, there were 14 other potential crimes that were referred to other investigators. 12 of those potential crimes are not public. We don't know the details. We don't know what they entail.
And we don't necessarily know if they're still ongoing.
That's true, that's a good point.
They might have already wound down.
That's a good point. So again, I go back to what I would argue is far more important, and that is potential financial crimes, conflicts of interest, maybe some money deals when it comes to foreign governments. That is something that would not only compromise the president if it's proven, but more importantly would give him an incentive to look out for his own best interests, which is financial motives or whatever, as opposed to the best interests of the American people. And so it's important for an investigation to happen in regard to those financial ties and conflicts of interest. But when it comes to obstruction of justice, again, a bunch of problematic things came up, and William Barr has shared a questionable interpretation. And it does appear that Mueller has said, look, there's not enough evidence to prove conspiracy. So that's where we're at. So we have to take a break, but when we come back, we are going to get to William Barr's testimony. And as I've said earlier, we will show you the inconsistencies between what William Barr said during his press conference and what the Mueller report actually says. Come right back.